What even is a remake? Is it a complete rebuild from the ground up, like with Final Fantasy VII? Or is it a faithful recreation of the game with a fresh coat of paint, like with Demon's Souls? Since we can't even agree on what a remake is, it's hard to know what you're getting when it's a remake of a 25-year-old SNES game. But that's exactly what we're going to explore as we dive into the remake of Trials of Mana. Trials of Mana, known as Seiken Densetsu 3 in Japan, came out in 1995. The original didn't see a Western release until the recent collection of Mana in 2019. It is no doubt a heavy lift to take an otherwise obscure 25-year-old SNES game and recreate it for newer consoles. So let's talk about the obvious update, the visuals. In my humble opinion, the original was one of the most beautiful 16-bit games ever created, and the remake does an awesome job of capturing what made the original so eye-catching. Trials of Mana is absolutely charming, and does an excellent job keeping what works from the original while upgrading its aesthetics to the modern era. Trials of Mana has a gorgeous, colorful art style with hyper-saturated colors, giving everything a deep, almost dreamlike hue. On the Switch, everything looks good, but there are frame rate drops pretty much all the time, even when docked. On the PS4 and PS5, it looks fantastic, and it has a rock-solid frame rate. The care they put in really shows that Square Enix knows how to transform a 2D game into a modern 3D RPG. With each area painstakingly recreated, the game feels like a love letter to the fans. It injects a few modern tweaks here and there, but it boldly sticks to its roots. This boldness is carried throughout all aspects of the game, and will likely shape how much you enjoy it. Saturated in vivid colors and old-school video game charm, Trials of Mana deserves way more praise and attention than it's gotten. Musically, the new incarnation of Trials of Mana's modern arrangements of the original chiptune soundtrack sound phenomenal. One feature I really like is the ability to swap between the remake and the original 16-bit soundtrack at any time. Both are just so good. In fact, at one point I switched to the original soundtrack and totally forgot to change it back. That's how good the original is, and how faithfully the updates are. The new music sounds familiar but fuller. Yes, the quality is great, but the soundtrack is limited. You'll listen to the same town or dungeon themes over and over, which can be a bit tiresome, so a little more variety would have been welcome. A surprising amount of the original script is left untouched and features fully voiced cutscenes. The English voice acting is okay, but the lines are a little bit overdramatic.
I will take care of it. Observe.
The Japanese audio track is also available for those who want to avoid the quirky voice acting. Well, it may be just as quirky, but you just won't know it if you don't speak Japanese. Square Enix completely overhauled Trials of Mana's graphics and reworked the soundtrack, but left the story mostly untouched. It's about as simple as you can get. You're the good guys, you're fighting the bad guys, and you need to save the world, of course.
The portal will open. Look.
The lore and the story of Trials of Mana are very traditional. You'll likely anticipate the main story beats or see the twist coming from around the corner. Where the story creates some interest, however, and separates itself from other games, is how you choose your hero and accompanying companions. At the start, you'll choose your 3-character party from a pool of 6, each with their own origin story and a story arc that influences the main plot, which was actually really well done. The stakes of the overall story remain the same, but by presenting you with different prologues, you see various motivations that led your custom-built party to this grand adventure. Clearly, a lot of heart was put into telling these origin stories, and some have some surprisingly somber moments.
He fulfilled his duties as the Golden Knight until the very end.
The other characters that you don't choose will appear in brief cameos, and it's implied that their own quest is still happening just off camera as they go it alone. This is such a creative idea that adds a layer of personalization and a crisscrossing narrative. I absolutely recommend playing through the game more than once with different characters, just to see how the story plays out differently each time. Now, even if you're a one and done type of player, you won't feel as if anything's missing from the story. The story and the overall adventure is totally linear. This isn't bad or good, but you should not expect a sprawling open world. You'll go to one location, complete a set of tasks, then move to the next location, rinse and repeat. The towns look great and each have their own character, but they're pretty bare bones. A few NPCs here and there may spout a couple of lines of dialogue that flesh out the areas a bit, but they won't give you any side quests or any side stories. Occasionally, talking with some NPCs will unlock equipable skill bonuses or boosts, but it's so rare that the effort may not feel worth it. From the start, Trials of Mana distinguishes itself from other traditional JRPGs by having you choose your pool of heroes instead of serving up a preset roster. The characters all come with base roles, and you'll want to take these into consideration when choosing your party at the beginning of your journey, since there's no turning back. Charlotte is your healer. Durin is a flashy swordsman, and Angela is an offensive mage. While Reese, Kevin, and Hawkeye feel more like hybrid characters. If you're looking to have a traditional party balanced with a dedicated healer, damage dealer, and tank, you might want to consider going with Durin, Angela, and Charlotte. While I'm sure all team compositions are probably viable, some are more sensible than others, so it's entirely possible to get in deep before wishing you'd made a different choice. Since I planned to play through multiple times, I knew I'd be picking different team compositions each time. I never had that FOMO. However, if you only plan to play through once, you'll likely want to be more discerning. I've always really liked the Mana series' unique action RPG battles, and just like so many other aspects of this game, the combat system is very true to the original. There's a great balance between real-time combat and party management, which mercifully pauses the action so you can cycle through the rings to find the command you want to give. A quick pause can be the difference between life and death, especially when playing on hard difficulty, which is the difficulty I recommend for most players, since the standard difficulty is just way too easy. Early on, the combat felt overly basic. You have simple light and heavy attacks in dodging. I started to wonder if the system would hold up in the long run, and thankfully my fears were laid to rest as more and more systems were layered in. While you can easily switch between any of the three heroes at any time, the AI for the characters you aren't playing is surprisingly solid. Your party members actually do what you want them to do, so there's no screaming at the screen because your healer is running headfirst into a melee attack while the rest of your party is hanging on by a thread. It took some time to get used to its chaotic rhythm for sure, but when Trials' combat clicked for me, it really clicked. All of the pieces came together in the best possible way. That's because the combat is fluid, flashy, and deep, especially in the late game when you've unlocked a wide array of moves and combos. The Mana series is known for being action-focused, and this remake lovingly captures that quality in its transition from 2D to 3D. Striking enemies swiftly or charging a heavier attack and then dodge rolling away feels weighty, and the powerful class strike abilities appropriately feel badass as you overwhelm your opponents. Upgrading your characters eventually leads to bigger combo chains, giving you more versatility in the heat of battle. Where Trials of Mana truly shines is in its creative boss battles. Understanding each of the characters' roles in the party becomes vital. Is the healer's stash of items and healing spells sufficiently topped up? Is the damage dealer able to exploit elemental weaknesses? Is your tank able to withstand an arena-wide AoE attack? It's a perfect way to test everything you've learned along the way. Character roles are given added depth with character changes as you level up past a certain point. This unlocks two more upgradable classes, one that's light and one that's dark, each with different playstyles. Depending on the character and the path you take, this will either focus their role or add versatility to them. For instance, Kevin has the ability to become the hardest hitting member of the team, but can instead exchange some of that raw power for the ability to protect his allies with spells to make them more durable. An added and much needed perk to the class changes are the new outfits that the characters unlock. They're really great, and you can sport any of the outfits that you've already unlocked. I spent way more time finding the right look for my party than I want to admit, but that's just because the designs were super fun, and those of you who appreciate a bit of fan service, they got you covered there too. The remake had some new endgame content that wasn't part of the original. To access it, you must first beat the main story. When you load back in, you're teleported just before the final dungeon, where you'll have a 2 to 3 hour side quest in a single long dungeon that builds to a large boss fight. While I enjoyed getting a bit more out of the game, don't expect some deep story reveals or anything beyond a few bits of character development. This content adds a 4th class option, which would be reason enough to play through this section since the combat here is by far the most enjoyable in the game. But it's also just a fun, dungeon crawling experience that feels like a rewarding challenge for getting this far. As a completionist, I loved spending my time getting the platinum. You'll need to play through this game a total of 3 times to max out all characters and make 3 specific characters your primary hero. Don't let the multiple playthroughs scare you though. Each playthrough is under 15 hours. It was a ton of fun to see how the story changed with each new mix of characters, and by taking a different path through the class upgrades, the game always felt fresh and repetition never set in even through the multiple playthroughs. To get all the trophies, it took me about 40 hours, and after putting this video together, I think I'm going to jump back in for another go. The world of Trials of Mana is filled with oddball characters, beautiful environments, action, drama, and so much more. Ultimately, remaking old games can be tough, but at a base level, the goal is pretty simple. To bring the best bits of an old game to life in a way that a new audience can appreciate. And Trials of Mana expertly accomplishes this goal. While there are many different types of remakes, I'd argue this is an ideal remake, and should be used as the standard. It holds tightly to the core of what made the original game and the Mana series as a whole so compelling to so many people at the time, while bringing a novelty and freshness to attract new players who maybe never even heard of the original. Trials of Mana is colorful, quirky, familiar, and a lot of fun. It should serve as a blueprint for how an older RPG can be remade in a way that keeps the charm and working parts of the original, but updates it so that it's graphically appealing to a modern audience. Whether you're a die-hard Mana series fan or just looking for something that charts its own path, even if that path is linear, Trials of Mana is for you. Okay, so there's Trials of Mana. Have you played it? What'd you think about it? And what's your favorite remake of all time? I'd love to hear about it in the comments down below. Now, if you liked the video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you're not subscribed, it's a great time to do so. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.